Thank you, Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, esteemed guests and colleagues, family and friends, and of course, graduands. It really is a great honour to be invited to speak to you today, and it's also something that really does fill you with a little trepidation. I was saying to people just before I came in, I was once before asked to perform this duty at a graduation, and it was in Toronto, and I'd been asked by the Vice-Chancellor if I would give this occasional address, and I was happy to and honoured to accept. And then when I arrived at the venue, just like today, and when we were putting on the gowns and so on, he said, "Oh, there are two speakers today, and the second one is Reuben Hurricane Carter." Now, some of you may know of Reuben Hurricane Carter. He was a boxer who was wrongly accused of murder, and Bob Dylan wrote a song about him, and then Denzel Washington starred in a film about him. So it became quite a burden, and as far as I know, Bob hasn't written a song about me, unless it's in one of the bootleg albums that I haven't seen. So I want to convey three messages to you in this brief address, and I'm sorry if you thought that the lectures were over, but I will be brief, I promise you. The first thing I want to acknowledge is the importance of the graduation as a celebration of the considerable achievement of you, the graduands. We recognise and we applaud your success today. And it was really lovely in the ceremony. I noticed a gentleman, I can see him now, sitting in the third row. As he was moving down the stairs, he held his testamure and in the scroll aloft and gave it a good shake. And it was such an expression of pride, and I think you all should be very, very proud of what you've done. And I think in congratulating the graduates here today, we're also, by implication, celebrating the work of the teachers and everybody who works at the university behind the scenes to create the conditions that make you such successful learners. And as the Chancellor so elegantly observed, it's so important to honour the enduring commitment and the aspirations of parents, families, loved ones and friends. Your graduation is a team effort, and this ceremony is a formal way of noting this invaluable partnership for success. So that's the first point. Let me move to the second one. And the second point concerns what I'll call the value of education. Now, economists, and with the greatest of respect to my Vice-Chancellor and to my Chancellor, they dedicate tremendous intellectual energy and material resources to calculating the value of education. Governments, transnational organisations such as OECD and the World Bank and many others spend millions to determine the yield for investment in education. Our Productivity Commission here is also working on this task to come up with a metric to express the value of an education. When I was in London, I had the opportunity, and it was a wonderful opportunity, to work with colleagues at the London School of Economics, Freudian, to do some modelling of funding mechanisms for special education to see if we could determine the value of current methods of supporting disabled children in classrooms. Again, our focus was on yield for expenditure, a calculus of education. Now, let me offer an alternative measure that many here, I think, will appreciate. The value of education, it seems to me, is most apparent when you don't have access to it. My dad was a bus conductor in the north of England in a town called Burnley. Are there any other people from Burnley here today? Perhaps not. My mother cleaned houses, and I remember that as a kid, the most vigorous thrashings that I received was when I truanted from school with friends. That really seemed to get up my father's nose, and more than other misdemeanours that I committed. So I think my father and my mother must have believed that an education was valuable, even though they didn't have the opportunity to complete theirs. Now, I see myself as a very privileged, extremely privileged person, and it's easy for me to sometimes forget or take for granted the value of the education that they so desperately wanted me to have. But let me tell you that my work has taken me to places where I'm jolted from my comfortable world, and I have learned how to recalculate very quickly that value of education. A few years ago, I was in a garage under a house in Pristina in Kosovo. And there were some young graduate students gathered there with me, and they told me about the horrors that they'd witnessed and that they'd experienced in their city. They also told me how the books in their language had been burned, destroyed, and they told me that they were physically prevented from going to university for a period of time. And then what they did was that they gathered in garages just like the one that I was in secret, and they tried to remember texts and continue their education. And it seemed to me to express very, very clearly how much education was prized by those people. Last year in Erbil in Iraq, I met with academics who told me of the continuing assassinations of professors across cities in their country. And they told me how so many of the teachers and professors had been forced into exile. Once a centre for educational excellence in the Islamic world, Iraq has been seriously reduced by war, international sanctions and continuing conflict. So the lesson that I draw is that the value of education is most apparent when you don't have access to it. Victoria University, I understand, having been here for a short period, is dedicated to expanding the chances of all people to succeed in a continuing education. And this is the research focus for the research institute that I now direct. I guess in some ways I'm returning to and expanding the lessons from my mum and my dad. Now, thankfully, I'm coming to the third and final point that I want to make. It seems to me that in speeches like this, it's customary to draw upon some wise and usually dead philosopher to give authority and gravitas to what you're saying. So perhaps I could go to Aristotle or to Confucius or to Wittgenstein or you could name many more, I'm sure. But I've selected two philosophers to finish with. The first one is an English philosopher, I don't think he's that well known, called David Swarbrick. And David Swarbrick is the violin player and singer in a band called Fairport Convention, and I'm sure that's very much before your time. In a song called Rosie, he sings the line, "The more I learn, the less I seem to know." That's exactly what I've found. It's important that we continue to question what we take for granted, that we press on learning how to see things in new and better ways. Heresy is fertile fodder for discovery. Why is this important? so that we can apply what we learn in order to make a difference, to be good global citizens who can improve the world and assist those who don't have access to the privileges that we take for granted. Almost every Australian education document that I read at the moment mentions globalisation, but I don't believe that we have sufficiently learned how to be good global citizens. And that comes home to me as somebody coming back to Australia and being greeted by the kind of immigration debate that we have at this time. Now, the final philosopher that I've chosen to finish off with is a past American president, not the present one, who is reported to have said, "I feel like a pit bull on the trouser leg of opportunity." I think that you have a great opportunity to go out and make a world somewhat better than the one that we've given to you. We here at Victoria University wish you all the very best in your endeavours. Thank you.